Good morning, San Diego. Welcome into another edition of the Braden Surprenant Show, live and local on the weekends, each and every Sunday. First Braden Surprenant Show during the Padres season. I was off last week. I was out in Tennessee, spending some time with the family on an Easter Sunday. And today, back in town, talking Padres baseball with all of you, talking everything that matters to San Diego, and not some of the stuff that we have to listen to on the weekends with the national media and the national radio shows that we have to deal with each and every weekend. It's finally great to get some Padres talk on a Sunday morning before we get you ready for the EcoWater SoCal San Diego Padres pregame show with Sam Levitt coming up at about 12:05 with a 105 first pitch today for the Padres in San Francisco. And probably for the next couple of months or so on the Braden Surprenant Show, we're going to focus a lot on the San Diego Padres. Obviously, it's our main sports team in town in the prime part of the season. And this San Diego Padres team off to an interesting start. It's a okay start, 5-6 start to the year. And when you talk about this San Diego Padres team starting at 5-6, I think fans have some mixed viewing on this. Mixed viewing in a sense of if this happened last year, I think they'd be a lot more patient. If this happened last year, I think Padres fans would be a lot more patient. And what I mean by that is it's early to the season. And so the team's going to need some time to gel together. The pitchers are going to need some time to ramp up. The hitters are going to need some time to adjust and get going, get into a rhythm and get into a groove. And with everything that the Padres had to deal with during the offseason, but more importantly, a spring training that was what we like to call non-traditional, it's going to be a little bit of time before they can really start hitting their stride. So a 5-6 start is not the worst if you're the San Diego Padres. They've already had a couple of games that have finished in a way that you would not like to see. You have already had a handful of games that looked a lot like last year. And I think in general, this team looks a lot like the 2023 Padres in terms of how they're made up. Starting pitching has been a lot better as of late, the second time through the rotation. We saw that with Joe Musgrove in his outing here against the Cardinals. We have now seen that with Michael King, who shoved last night. Michael King was outstanding last night for the Padres. 7 innings strong, shutout ball. That's the type of pitcher that the Padres thought they were getting when they made that trade. Not to say that they've been disappointed so far, but he's going to need some time to ramp up. And he looked great last night. I think the Padres bullpen in general has been kind of a disappointment. And I'm going to get to them in a second. But a 5-6 start, it's okay. It's not the best, obviously. It's one game below 500. They are in second place for anybody that is keeping track of that here during the month of April. You can't necessarily win the division or make the playoffs in the month of April, but you definitely can lose it, as we learned a lot last year. But this team this year so far looks a lot like last year's team. You're going to get some times where offensively they look really good, and then other days they don't look very good, which is fine, I guess. I think it'd be a lot better. I think you're starting to see the holes on the Padres team are still holes despite what might have happened in Korea where they put up a ton of runs, or even that Sunday against the Giants last week on Easter Sunday where they put up a ton of runs. And there are a lot of bright spots on this team to start the season as well, especially in the department of players that the Padres need to have really big seasons starting off and having some pretty good years. Again, it is early. I wanted to take a look at, and we're going to take more of a look at it in the next segment, but the Padres offensively have gotten off to a pretty good start in terms of their overall averages, a lot better than it was last year at this time. Bogart's up to 280 now, 279 with the hit last night. The bloop shot that really sparked or started the night off for San Diego to tease it in 293. Cronenworth's cooled down a little bit, but hitting 286. I mean, if he can stay at 286 the whole season, the Padres are going to be a really good baseball team. Machado's off to a poor start, but we've seen him get off to slow starts in the past. He gets off to slow starts all the time, so I'm not really worried about Manny. He's got a track record. Hassan Kim, slower start than I think a lot of people would like to see, but he did put together a really good at bat last night as he's now hitting 200. Profar couldn't ask for a better performance out of Profar last night with the grand slam, bringing Slam Diego back on the map early this season compared to last season where it was August when they hit their first grand slam. But Profar's off to a good start too. I'm not going to sit here and say Profar is an everyday starting left fielder, but he's done a really good job since returning. And he plays a lot better here in San Diego than he does in other places. That's why I'm not really worried about Jurickson Profar in the season he had last year. And I know statistically he was the worst baseball player in the league last year, as people like to say, but I think it's different with him playing in San Diego. He goes 1 for 3 last night, obviously with the grand slam. That was the big swing of the bat that jolted the Padres to a win. Camposano, can't say enough about how great Camposano's been. He's been good behind the plate too, but we all knew he was going to be a good hitter if he got everyday at bats, and he's been getting everyday at bats. He's at 361. My buddy last night, Matt, had to say, he's like, Luis Camposano might be hitting the most quiet 361 out of anybody in Major League Baseball. It's 100% true. Luis Camposano was batting 7th in the order last night. He's hitting 361. I think there's something to be said about that with lineup construction, and I do want to talk a little bit about that in the next segment as well. Tyler Wade getting the job done as much as he can when he plays. He's hitting 278. He hasn't been atrocious. He's doing a pretty good job of filling in for Machado at third base until he gets back. And then Jackson Merrill, I'll get to this with lineup construction, but I really like him batting in the 9 hole. He's done a pretty good job holding his own so far. He's only hitting 233. I'm not worried about him in center field at all, but he continues to do a good job of flipping the lineup around, and I'll explain that of why he's so successful at that in just a little bit. Let's talk about the Padres as a whole. My overall synopsis of the Padres 11 games in, which is kind of ridiculous, but at the same time, this is talk radio, and we like to say ridiculous things on talk radio. This is an entertainment platform. My overall take on the Padres this year is they're going to be a mediocre team throughout the season. And they have a lot of holes. And I'm not saying the team's going to suck. And I think they could outlive that. But I think there's going to be a lot of days where they look really good, and there's going to be a lot of days where they look really bad. It's kind of like they're giving you mixed signals. When you just start out for a relationship, you're trying to figure out if the other person likes you or not, or if you're just friends. You get the mixed signal, the very high of highs on certain occasions in which the Padres score a ton of runs, the offense looks really good, the pitching shoves, and all of a sudden, they look like a team that can't lose ever again. And then you get the Padres team that we've seen a couple of times this season that can't get the runners in scoring position and can't put up runs and are struggling to get hits. And the pitching staff doesn't hold up to their end of the bargain. And the bullpen can't hold on to leads or keep the deficit from increasing any further than it actually is. It's the highs and the lows. It's the ups and the downs. And to be honest with you, that's what a mediocre team does. They have the ability to be a really great baseball team, but at the same time, they have glaring holes that end up leading to catastrophic results. That's what mediocre baseball is. That's what mediocre sports teams are. We've seen that with a lot of sports teams in San Diego. I remember when I was in college when the Chargers were still here. They were like a 500 ball club. But the narrative was they were like the best 500 team out there in the NFL. Oh, they're the best 8-loss team or 8-win team. They're the best 6-win team, best 7-win team. They're so good, but their record is just that things haven't gone their way. Ball has bounced their way. I remember used to like saying that too as a fan. It was like, they're so talented. They're so good. They just have a couple things not go their way. They make a couple of mistakes here, have an off night there. But the problem with that is you're describing a Major League Baseball team. You're describing a mediocre team. That's what mediocre teams do. They have some ups, they have some downs. At the end of the year, they're right around 500. So I think, and this is kind of the case for most Major League Baseball teams, they're going to hover around 500 for most of the year. And if you look at it for any stretch of time during the baseball season, at the end of the season, for all of these teams, most of them are playing 500 baseball. And then it's a winning streak or two that make the difference. And that's going to be the Padres this year. So I think it's going to be a lot of up and down and kind of hovering around 500 for most of the year. And it's going to be, what is that streak that will determine if the Padres make the playoffs or if they turn into last year's team? If they go on a 5 to 10 game winning streak, mostly 10, and it's possible. I mean, even the A's went on a long winning streak last year. I think they won 7 in a row. Padres couldn't do that last year. But if the Padres go on a long winning streak or a really decent winning streak at any point in the season, I do think they're a playoff team. I think it will be in a spot. They will be in a spot where they'll be battling for a playoff spot. If they don't and go on a losing streak or maybe 2, then they're going to be last year's team and they might go 82 and 80. That's where they're at right now. Because they don't have that extra bat. They only have the one left-hander on the team. They don't have the bench pieces that they need. Their bullpen that was expected to be a strength is actually turning out to be kind of a weakness right now. But I think they will switch. I do think they will turn that around. So after watching 11 games, that's my overall synopsis. Now, a couple of things could go right for the Padres, and they could start turning things around rather quickly, or a lot quicker than expected. And I believe that they could do that with this team, especially if they could get into a rhythm, and if they could play a lot better in one-run games than they did last year. I mean, last year's team, honestly, was such a fluke with one-run games that just by, and I said this during the offseason, if you kept the same roster as last year and didn't change anything, they probably finished 5 to 6 games better in the standings than they did the previous year with no upgrades. Now, obviously, this year they don't have the upgrades. They actually ended up losing some of those pieces. Juan Soto's off to a good start. Josh Hader, not so much. Blake Snell, haven't seen a pitch yet. But I think it's a 500 team that's just going to dance around 500 for most of the year. I don't necessarily know if that's a wild take or not. I don't really think it is. But that's just what they are. They are who they are who we think they are. You are what your record is. I don't know how many cliches I can get in right now, but that's just the state of the San Diego Padres right now. Bullpen, I wouldn't say it's concerning, but I am surprised about the bullpen because the entire offseason I was talking about how great the bullpen has looked or how great it looks like on paper and how it might be a major strength, and they loaded up on all these arms. They have 4 to 5 guys that have closing experience in Major League Baseball. They have been a major disappointment so far in the season. But I will, not that it's a built-in excuse. I don't want to give a built-in excuse. But I will say, with the bullpen, you got to give them a chance to get ramped up just as much as you give the starting pitchers a chance. And we've done that with the starting pitching, and they've done pretty good in their second round through. I mean, Dylan Cease, even though they lost on Friday, Dylan Cease only gave up 2 runs. He wasn't awful. He had 7 strikeouts, gave up 2 runs. Yesterday was a great outing out of Michael King. Yu Darvish has put up some stellar outings as the ace of the staff, the veteran leader. Never worry about you. Yu's so great. He was such a pro. Yu was always going to be ready to go at the beginning of the season, and he's been every single year, with the exception of maybe last year just because of the World Baseball Classic kind of screwing things up. But the second time through the rotation, the Padres rotation has been a lot better. So I think you got to give the bullpen a little bit of time to figure it out. Because they have some high-powered arms. They got some guys that could get the job done. Last night they did. They looked great last night. But I think if you want to overreact, the bullpen is a lot worse than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be one of the best. I still think you got to give them time. I think offensively, the Padres are a lot like last year. They still have time to turn that around. I mean, it's early. And I do think the holes on the bench when it comes to spot starts and pinch hits late are going to be potentially the end of this team unless they address it at the trade deadline or decide to pick up Tommy Pham for a low number. And that was kind of stoking the fires right before the start of the season, and we haven't really heard anything about that since. That's my overall synopsis of this Padres team. Bullpen, major disappointment. Starting rotation, turning things around, and some individuals in the lineup are off to really good starts, and I'm impressed. And the guys in the lineup that are doing a really good job, Jake Cronenworth starting off the season really well. Luis Camposano being an asset where the catching position for so long had not been a major asset for the Padres is now turning into one of their better sides with Luis Camposano. Higashioka hitting that home run a couple of days ago. But overall, with this 5-6 team, they're around kind of where I thought they would be. And I will say this about the team, and kind of being different than last year's team. I think a lot of Padres fans, my friends say it, I totally believe it. I kind of have that feeling as well. I think a lot of Padres fans were duped by last year and the whole narrative of it's early to the point where this year they're living and dying on every game, which is very, very much a bad decision to make if you are a San Diego Padres. If you're a baseball fan in general, you cannot react to baseball games like it's the National Football League or college football, where you only got 12 to 16 games in a season and it's once a week. The whole build up to the game, and it's like the win takes you through the next week. You're happy, the loss, and you just feel awful for the rest of the week. You can't do that with baseball because you play every day. You're going to go insane. But I think a lot of Padres fans were duped last year by the whole it's early narrative, and then they never turned it around to the point of if the start of the season this year in 2024 was last year, I don't think anybody would be worried about the way the team's playing right now. But the fact that last year they started off slow and never hit their stride with the talent that they had, I think Padres fans are a little weary, and that's why I think we've been nitpicking on a lot of different aspects of this Padres team. But last night was great. Could have used a little bit more with the sticks after getting a grand slam in the first inning, but the pitching staff picked it up. We're going to talk more about the Padres game last night. We're going to talk about lineup construction and kind of where certain players are placed right now and why it's lengthening the lineup and why you got to keep those guys in those spots. I talked about it yesterday with USD, but it's 100% true. We'll get to that. We're going to get to your phone calls, 833-288-0973, 833-288-0973. I'm going to try to read as many of your chat messages as possible in the YouTube chat, but I want to hear from the fans. I haven't get to hear from the fans anymore. You guys got to call in, 833-288-0973, 833-288-0973. This is the Braden Surprenant Show. We are live and local on a Sunday morning, leading you up to eventually the Eco Water SoCal Padres pregame show with Sam Levitt and Padres baseball coming up at 1:05. We got some Padres baseball breakdown when we come back on the Braden Surprenant Show on San Diego's #1 sports station, 97.3 The Fan.
Profar, switch hitter, batting left-handed, swings to the first pitch, skies it deep down the right field line. Yastrzemski is back to watch. This one is gone! A grand slam for Profar. Tucked it inside the pole down the right field line, and Jurickson's first home run of the season is a big one. 4-0 here in the first.
Jurickson Profar with the grand slam last night was the big blast for the Padres in the first inning, and then after that, went to nothing. It was kind of a boring game. Aside from the fact that you watch a Michael King shove, that was great. Michael King was outstanding last night for the Padres. 7 innings, no earned runs, 4 hits, 4 punch-outs, 94 pitches through 61 strikes, got his ERA down to 3.14. Outstanding outing for the number 4 guy in the rotation. Lengthens out the rotation. I'm going to talk about lengthening out the lineup in just a second. It was Jesse Agler on the call, 97 through the fan, right here, live and local on a Sunday. I'm Braden Surprenant. It's the Braden Surprenant Show on San Diego's #1 sports station, 97.3 The Fan. Be sure to follow me on all social media platforms at B_SURP, at BSurp. Follow me on YouTube as well, at B_SURP. We are streaming live on all of those platforms. We are on 97 through the fan. On X, we're on at my account. On X at BSurp. We're on my YouTube page. We're on 97 through the fans YouTube page, on Facebook, and we're on Twitch on 97.3 The Fan. So thanks again for all of you for tuning in. Appreciate all of you guys jumping in on the chat as well, as the Padres got a good win last night. That was a solid win for the Pod Squad. Be nice if they were able to put up more runs later in the game, but you'll take the 4 runs in the first inning. That's a good way to start. Michael King absolutely shuts down the Giants last night. As I mentioned, bullpen looked good with Tom Cosgrove, Kolek, and Suarez. None of them allowed a hit in relief in the 3 innings of relief that they had. And the Padres go on to win 4-0 and get their 5th win of the season. I just kind of overall recapped, or really gave my analysis of what I think the Padres are potentially going to be based on the first 11 games. And it's early in the season. And again, as I mentioned before, I think a lot of this year and kind of reacting to games stems from last year getting duped by the whole it was early narrative and nothing ever changing. But I will say it's still early and the Padres can make some improvements, obviously, in different spots. But I think they should be making some improvements with the roster overall. There are some guys still available out there. And I think it's a position for them in which they are trying to save as much money as possible, but also having an ability to, if they are in a major playoff race at the trade deadline, which they are expecting to be with the talent that they have, to have the resources to make pickups at the trade deadline and not go over the luxury tax or the competitive balance tax. I think that is definitely something that is being played out right now when it comes to why haven't they signed Tommy Pham, or, why haven't they made that big trade yet? Or, they've talked about, potentially bringing in Luis Arraez. I actually wouldn't mind that, but I think that's going to be a month away potentially if they decide to do that. And it depends on how quickly the Marlins want to jump ship, because they're off to an 0-9 start. And I don't think that team's turning it around anytime soon. They get rid of Kim Ng, who did a great job in Miami, and they immediately turn into an 0-9 ball club. And again, it's early. I keep saying it's early for the month of April, and then after that, you can stop saying it's early. But there's definitely some factors that are keeping, I think, AJ Preller from being able to adjust to this lineup, make some extra pickups. But as of right now, I think the Padres have to let it play out instead of let go for a little bit instead of just 11 games. I want to talk about the lineup real quick. I have not seen a lineup for the Padres yet for today's game. And if you're in the chat and you want to let me know if they actually put it out or not, that'd be much appreciated. But I haven't seen one yet. It should be coming out relatively soon, but I haven't seen one. It's going to be Matt Waldron against Logan Webb today. Waldron versus Webb in the ball game this afternoon. So the number 1 starter for the Giants, number 5 starter for the San Diego Padres. Waldron 0-1 with a 9 ERA. Did get 7 strikeouts against the St. Louis Cardinals, but you would like him to have a little bit of better of an outing than he did against St. Louis, where they tagged his knuckleball and it wasn't knuckling really all the time. Padres able to get to Logan Webb later in an opening day. He's 0-1 of the 6.52 ERA, and he has 10 punch outs in his 2 starts that he has had this season. But with Logan Webb for the Giants, soft contact guy, very soft contact guy because of his slow velo, low velo, and great off-speed pitches. It might be a frustrating day to watch the Padres at the plate. So hopefully he can get some barrels on him and force some hits and get into a spot like it was on opening day where the Padres kind of slashed and dashed all over the field. Padres lineup last night, and it's what we're going to go off of. They've used it majority of the time. The top 5 have been the same the entire Mike Schilt era, is what we'd like to call it. Bogarts, Tatis, Cronenworth, Machado, and Kim. Then after that, it's some type. Actually, really, Profar's really bad. He's really hit 6 most of the time anyway. And after that, it's Profar, Campusano, Wade, and Merrill. When it comes to lineup construction, and I do think this is a major factor, I think this needs to play out, especially for some of the young guys. I said it before at the beginning of the year. I think Jackson Merrill should be batting 9th the entire season, regardless of what he does. He could break Ted Williams' record, hitting over 400. And I still think he should be batting 9th for the majority of the season, because he could just focus on himself and being Jackson Merrill instead of being the guy. Now, subconsciously, for a lot of baseball players, that order that you hit, you start to think that you have to be that player. So when you bat leadoff, you have to think, I got to grind out at bats. I got to walk more. I got to get on base. I'm just trying to get on base, especially for young players. Same thing in like the 3 spot, right? You got to be the guy that's driving in runs. I got to be hitting gap to gap. I got to be putting the ball over the fence, cleanup hitter. I got to be driving in the runs when they load the bases up for me. Kind of the cliche spots of what you want out of a leadoff guy compared to a 2-hitter, compared to a 3-hitter, compared to a 4-hitter. And then outside the top 5, you're just in spots where you can you really focus on yourself. I mean, there's different situations, obviously. If you lead off an inning, it kind of flips the roles a little bit. But for young players, they always want to try to live up to what the spot they are in the order instead of just doing them and getting them to a point where they are doing what got them to that spot in the first place. Luis Campusano's off to a great start. He's hitting 361. So naturally, after 11 games, a lot of people will be like, well, he's got to be hitting like 4 or 5. He's got to be hitting 3, 4, or 5, and he's hitting so well. You got to move him up to the top of the order. I think for certain instances, that might be the case. I think that's more for veteran players. But for young players like Luis Campusano and Jackson Merrill, let them play in a spot where they don't have any pressure to be the guy. We talk about it a lot, and I know a lot of people get upset about this, but the reality is one of the teams that does this the best just so happens to be our arch rival in the Los Angeles Dodgers. But the reason why a lot of their young guys come up and have success is they get put in a spot where they don't have to be the guy. And even if you tell them they don't have to be the guy, it doesn't matter. That's just the natural reaction you're going to get from a human being. Let's take a look at Jake Cronenworth last year. Jake Cronenworth playing first base thought he had to be that stereotypical left-handed first baseman where he's trying to put every ball into the seats. That's not him. That's not his game. His game in 2020 when he was hitting so well and actually hitting some home runs was going opposite field, that inside-out shot to left, being able to use all parts of the field, taking pitches where they came. That's what made Jake Cronenworth good in 2020. Gets his contract. He's getting paid a little bit more. They put him at first base. He thinks he has to be the home run hitter. And he has a bad year last year. This year, a lot more like 2020, where he had one of his best years. So even though he's in the 3 spot as a veteran, after playing last year, he doesn't have to worry about trying to be that guy. He could just be him. And that's why I think it's great to have Jackson Merrill in the 9 spot. I think it's great to have Luis Camposano in the 7 spot. Leave them there. Let them do their thing. You don't have to move the order around all the time. And I know that's the new thing in Major League Baseball, playing matchups and getting guys that are hot. And I think there is something to that. But when you're building out this lineup, keep the young guys down. Keep them down at the bottom of the order. Let them succeed. And let them continue to have success in that spot. I don't mind Xander being the number 1 hitter in the lineup. I mean, I'd rather have a guy that's speedier. And whether or not you want to flip him and Kim, I think it's an interesting topic. I still prefer Fernando to start the game off because of his speed, because he's the best hitter on the team, most exciting hitter on the team. I need that guy coming up as many times as humanly possible. And then you can readjust. I think Tatis, Bogarts, and Machado are not a bad 1, 2, 3. I don't mind Cronenworth. He's off to a good start right now in the 3 spot, but I still don't think he's a 3-hole hitter on a playoff team. That's nothing against Jake Cronenworth, but that's just not who he is. It's not his fault. It's just not who he is. I think Bogarts, Tatis, and Machado need to be up in the first inning in some type of order. And then after that, the top 5 need to be those 3 plus Cronenworth plus Kim. And then after that, it really doesn't matter. Let those guys do their thing. So we'll see what the lineup is. I'll forward that along to you once I get it from the San Diego Padres, once they put it out for a big matchup coming up today at 1:05. I don't know if that's a must-win game yet for the Padres this early in the season, but it would be nice to take 2 out of 3 from the Giants. And ultimately, in reality, in a 7-game series, this is game 7 against the Giants. It's tied 3-3. It'd be nice to win the first half series against San Francisco because you don't play them again until September. And this is a team you're going to be battling for a playoff spot with. And you got to win as many tiebreakers over the Giants as humanly possible. So it's pretty much a must-win game today for the Padres, as crazy as that sounds, with early as it is. Major League Baseball, though, has a very bad pitching problem. Another ace goes down to Tommy John surgery last night. I'm going to talk about more on why this is happening. And no, it's not the pitch clock. It might have to do with what's happening at the youth level. We'll talk more about that when we come back. We get to your phone calls as well. 833-288-0973. 833-288-0973. Braden Surprenant Show, live and local each and every Sunday. San Diego's #1 sports station, 97.3 The Fan. Welcome back to the Braden Surprenant Show, live and local each and every Sunday morning on San Diego's #1 sports station, 97.3 The Fan. Playing some Blink-182 for you. Coming back. Local band, obviously. You can follow me on all social media platforms at B_SURP. I am on Twitter and Instagram and TikTok. I'm also on YouTube at BSurp. On top of streaming this show, multifaceted program, on 97 Through the Fan's social media accounts, 97 Through the Fan SD on Twitter, 97 Through the Fan SD on Instagram, and 97 Through the Fan on YouTube as well. You can also check us out on Facebook. We're on there also. Thanks again for joining the show today. Thanks for making my day a part of yours. Sunday morning, couldn't get up, going to get coffee and donuts, going to church, if you're going to some type of travel ball or softball or youth sport events, maybe you're getting ready to go check out the USD Toreros take on the LMU Lions today in town in baseball. I will be doing that later today on ESPN Plus and USDToreros.com as the Toreros try to sweep LMU today. Good game last night. A little comeback for USD. Great game on Friday night as well. They're on an 8-game winning streak, being led by a lot of local products, which is good to see. So that pitch will be at 1 o'clock at Fowler Park. I do want to mention other news and notes about the show. Obviously, we'll be here each and every Sunday from 8 to 10. I will be missing the show on May 19th. I'll be out at my brother's graduation in Tennessee. But aside from that, we're going to be cleared to go for the rest of the season and looking forward to it. Again, follow me on all social media platforms. I went curling last week, which was kind of fun in Tennessee. You can see it on my Instagram account at B_SURP. Put a reel out there of the curling in Nashville. It was pretty fun to go out and curl. Something I mean, obviously from Southern California, I don't have to do too often. I've never tried it before. It was a fun time. I would definitely recommend do it again. Let's talk about, I'm going to get to travel baseball in a second. Major League Baseball has very much got a pitching problem. They have a very large, glaring problem right now in Major League Baseball. It's not very good. As this was put out by Yankee WRLD, Yankee World on Twitter, the current list of notable starting pitchers on the injured list has to be the most talented it's ever been. Listen to this list. It is like almost a page long. I'll go through it quick. These are all the starting pitchers of note in Major League Baseball that have started the season or are now on the injured list here in 2024. Garrett Cole, Jacob deGrom, Shohei Ohtani. Obviously, he's hitting now, but that's a different story. Sandy Alcantara, Spencer Strider, who will probably have to undergo Tommy John surgery and be out for the season. Shane McClanahan, Max Scherzer, Shane Bieber, Justin Steele, Kodai Senga, Kyle Bradish, Brandon Woodruff, Sonny Gray, Clayton Kershaw, Erie Perez, Justin Verlander. Taking another deep breath. Eduardo Rodriguez, Robbie Ray, Drew Rasmussen, Jeffrey Springs, Gavin Williams, Lucas Giolito, Shane Baz, Lance McCullers Jr., Brian Wu, Nick Lodolo, Dustin May, Alex Cobb, Tony Gonsolin, Luis Garcia, and John Means. All starting pitchers. All on the injured list. Now, not all of those happen to be UCL injuries, although that is definitely a major problem for Major League Baseball as well, especially with the news of Spencer Strider. But it's been such a big problem that Tony Clark, San Diego product, who is the executive director of the Players Association, put out this statement yesterday. Despite unanimous player opposition and significant concerns regarding health and safety, the commissioner's office reduced the length of the pitch clock last December, just one season removed from imposing the most significant rule change in decades. Since then, our concerns about the health impacts of reduced recovery time have only intensified. The league's unwillingness thus far to acknowledge or study the effects of these profound changes is an unprecedented threat to our game and its most valuable asset, the players. I don't necessarily think the pitch clock is a main component for this because we were trending in this direction anyway. I'm sure it doesn't help, but I'm not blaming the pitch clock for the injuries to these pitchers. I think there's multiple factors at play here. I think one of them was thrown to us back in 2022 when you had Tyler Glasnow talking about obviously the sticky stuff and RPMs and everything, and how it's been a big reason why they have led to so many injuries. Here's Tyler Glasnow 2 years ago, kind of warning everybody in Major League Baseball about what could possibly be the problems or why all their pitchers are falling off and being on the injured list.
But I 100% believe that contributed to me getting hurt. No doubt, without a doubt. I think like it's ridiculous. Like I have used sticky stuff before. It's ridiculous that like it seems like this whole public perception of like, oh, it's just like select few of people. Like your favorite pitcher probably 50 years ago was using something too. Like if you felt these balls, how inconsistent they were, like you have to use something. So in the past, my like substance of choice is sunscreen and rosin. Like just nothing egregious, something to where I can get a grip on the ball so it doesn't feel dusty. But 2 starts ago against the Nationals, I went cold turkey, nothing. And before that start, I remember when all this stuff came out, I was talking to people and talking to doctors, and they were like, the thing that maybe MLB doesn't realize or that players don't realize is like, what is the injury, like, what is the prevention of, like, maybe it'll add to injuries. And in my mind, I was like, that sounds dumb. That sounds like an excuse a player would use to make sure he can use sticky stuff. But I threw to the Nationals with nothing. I don't use sticky stuff I don't use spider tack. I don't need more spin. I have huge hands. I spin the ball fine. I want grip. I did well against the Nationals, probably one of the best starts I had all year. I woke up the next day and was like, I am sore in places that I didn't even know I had muscles in. Like I felt completely different. I switched my fastball grip and my curveball grip. I've thrown it the same way for however many years I played baseball. I had to put my fastball deeper into my hand and grip it way harder. And I had to, instead of holding my curveball at the tip of my fingers, I had to dig it deeper into my hand. So I'm like choking the shit out of all my pitches. My cue I used to use with Snyder was hold the ball like an egg, like nice and loose, be loose. That's out of the window. So I now have to develop a new cue. I have to develop something where I can't hold the ball light anymore. I have to dig it deep into my hand. So I'm taking it, and you have to think, I'm not a doctor. I know you guys probably know that. But I'm taking a fastball. I'm squeezing the ball twice as hard. So all of this is I'm recruiting all these muscles, and I'm taking my arm as hard as I can, throwing.
So he's talking a lot about, obviously sticky stuff and contributing to, a reason why with the ball being slick and not having a good grip was a big reason why he ended up getting hurt. And I think there is something to that. I do think there is a little bit to the pitch clock, but to be honest with you, I mean, the biggest concern here with Major League Baseball and why they will never address it is because it's the same thing with all the other sports is some of their biggest money makers seem to be very harmful, but they don't want to change it because that's why people go watch the sport. The NFL kind of teeters around that, but for Major League Baseball, what are the guys that are getting paid a lot of money pitching wise? What are they? What kind of pitchers are they? Are they guys like Zach Davies that like twirl some curveballs in there and get ground ball outs and, not a high velo guy? No, they're guys that throw the absolute living snot out of a baseball. 100 mile an hour pitchers. We get 100 mile an hour pitchers all the time in baseball now. You see it in college now. There's multiple D1 college teams that got guys throwing over 100 out of the bullpen. It's not good for your arm. Try to increase the spin rate. Everything to try to throw the ball as hard as possible. Give everything that you got early because you're playing the analytic game. And these guys' arms, first of all, they can't make it through these games very long. And second, they're just blowing their arms out. high spin rate fastballs, or they're overthrowing and the sliders are destroying arms. But that's only some of the problem. I think a lot of the problem is travel baseball, to be honest with you. And I think it's the way kids play baseball nowadays. They never stop playing baseball. It's all the time. You have to play baseball all the time if you want to make your high school team, if you want to be able to make it to college. Got to be playing on this team. Got to be playing on this team. Got to be playing now. If I don't play during the fall, I'm not going to get on this next team. It's ridiculous. And the only reason why a lot of travel ball coaches are saying that is because they get a paycheck during that time, which I think is utterly ridiculous. And I honestly think travel ball is ruining baseball for a lot of kids, and I think it's ruining baseball and the product of baseball. Kids being able to play multiple sports is a big reason why they're able to rest their arms during the season, during the off season. They can work on other sports. They can work on different muscles. They could play and use different sports to improve their sports. But the baseball all the time, and it's more so for the pitchers. It's the pitching all the freaking time to win tournaments that don't matter. It doesn't matter. Travel ball tournaments don't matter. The championships you win travel, nobody cares. Nobody cares if coaches win championships. It's for development for the kids. That's the whole reason why they came up with travel ball. These kids are throwing way too much at the youth level. They're throwing pitches they shouldn't be throwing at the youth level. And it's really getting to a point now. You're seeing it. All of these players in Major League Baseball have gone through travel ball, and they're blowing out their arms when they get to the pros. It's really ridiculous. There's more on that we could talk about when we come back. This is the Braden Surprenant Show, live and local. San Diego's #1 sports station, 97.3 The Fan. Hour number 2, final hour of the Braden Surprenant Show here, live and local on San Diego's #1 sports station, 97.3 The Fan. All of you that are participating at Pedal at the Cause, shout out to you guys down there at Petco Park. It's a great event put on by the SanDiegoPadres each and every year for cancer research. So thanks to all of you participating this morning down at Pedal at the Cause. Driving down there for the fun run, or you already did the bike ride or whatever, big shout out to you guys for getting up and doing that today. Pedal for a Cause down at Petco Park. Great to see it. And great for have all of you guys jumping in on the show today. We really appreciate it, as we got Padres baseball coming up in a couple of hours. Eco Water SoCal pregame show with Sam Levitt coming up at 12:05. First pitch at 1:05. Padres trying to take down the San Francisco Giants and win the first best of 7 between the Giants and the Padres, as they will not play again until September. A nice little momentum for the rest of the year if they can win today. Matt Waldron going against Logan Webb today is the matchup, and Sam Levitt will have more on that later on. I do want to talk about this pitching problem that Major League Baseball has again, and I kind of was talking a little bit about it before we went to break, ran out of time, about young players just pitching way too much and pitching a ton at the lower levels. High velo guys now, high spin rates, sliders are definitely a major contributing factor to a lot of this. Major League Baseball's Players Association wants to, put a little bit of the blame on the pitch clock. I think a little bit could go to that, but it's not. To me, the pitch clock is a minor factor in probably the grand scheme of what has evolved from baseball players over the years, and kids not playing multiple sports and just focusing on baseball and throwing year round and playing in all these different leagues and blowing out their arms. Jim Bowden, former general manager who is an MLB analyst and insider for CBS Sports, The Athletic, SiriusXM, and MLB Network Radio, was on MLB Network Radio earlier today talking about the Spencer Strider situation. And here's what he had to say about aces pitching and what he would rather see out of an ace compared to what is happening currently with some of the aces. Here's what Jim Bowden had to say earlier today on MLB Network Radio.
If you're a GM and a pitching coach, I would listen to Meister and Andrews and Tim Kremchek and Neil Alatrosh. I would get a committee of the 5 best orthopedic doctors for pitchers, and I would put them in a room, and I would kind of go through how can we keep our guys healthy? How can we do it? Because to me, you're going to have to dial down the obsession with making the exact pitch and the exact mechanic that maximizes the chance for outs, because I'd rather have my aces be able to make 30 starts and be there in October. You know, that's my preference, rather than looking at them on the injured list, having short snapshots of success. I want long careers of 200 innings apiece, and I think that's where the study and the understanding has to come. So instead of you having to throw 98 to 100 on every single pitch, maybe I'll go back and look at Justin Verlander in his prime, throwing 94, 96, and then dialing it up 99 to 100 when he needed it. Maybe that's the better way to go. And he's throwing his fastball 60% of the time, and the breaking ball 20%, and the changeup 20%, and the other changeup 20%. And maybe that's the formula that works better. And yes, maybe your ERA is 3.6 instead of 2.7, and maybe you lose a couple games because of it. But maybe it's better to have him out there for 30 starts and 200 innings than it is to have him out there at 14 starts and 130 innings. And I think that's where the balance is.
That's 100%. I totally agree with what Jim Bowden is saying there. It's one of those situations where, and people like to talk about analytics all the time. And I think there's a lot of benefits of analytics, but that is just one of the downsides of some of these analytics, is trying to get that perfect pitch, trying to just, go all out early in the season, and early in innings and just give me your full effort each and every inning. Almost like, remember in the All-Star games in the past, you got to see starting pitchers just rear back and throw because they knew they were only going to throw one inning. I mean, it seemed like almost every starting pitcher was close to hitting 100 miles an hour, and you're not used to seeing that out of those pitchers because they're trying to make it through the entire season. All-Star games, like, well, I only got to go 3 innings. Or 3 batters. I'm going to go out there and sling it, put on a show for the All-Star game. You're getting that every night now in Major League Baseball. And that's why these guys can't get into games. They can't pitch in all these innings. They're just going high pitch count, perfect pitches, perfect pitch sequence, trying to achieve something that only maybe a robot can do. And you're getting guys blowing out their arms. It's bad on multiple fronts. One, you're missing, and I went through the list. I mean, I'll go through it again. There are a lot of guys that are starting pitchers that are some of the best in Major League Baseball that are not playing right now. Garrett Cole, Jacob deGrom, Shohei Ohtani, Sandy Alcantara, Spencer Strider, Shane McClanahan, Max Scherzer, Shane Bieber, Justin Steele, Kodai Senga, Brandon Woodruff, Sonny Gray, Clayton Kershaw, Erie Perez, Justin Verlander, Eduardo Rodriguez, Robbie Ray, Lucas Giolito, Gavin Williams, Jeffrey Springs, Drew Rasmussen, Shane Baz, Lance McCullers Jr., Brian Wu, Nick Lodolo, Dustin May, Alex Cobb, Tony Gonsolin, Luis Garcia, John Means. We talk about all the time about Major League Baseball wanting to expand their sport, right? You saw it with the A's right now. They want to move the A's to Vegas so they can add 2 more teams, they can settle all the stadium stuff, and they can expand Major League Baseball. And one of the biggest components against expanding Major League Baseball is the lack of starting pitching. Because you watch the games right now, and there's not enough starting pitchers go around. I got news for you. You got like 3 teams worth of starting rotations on the injured list that are all studs. You could make 2, maybe even 3 starting rotations that would be top 10 in Major League Baseball off of the list of the pitchers that are currently not pitching because they're on the injured list. Jim Bowden said it best. I want this guy making 30 starts for me and into the playoffs more so than having a perfect outing of getting the pitch sequencing and over pitching in the month of April. I know the owners want that. They're investing a ton of money in starting pitching because there's not enough to go around because these guys get hurt all the time because they're overthrowing. They're using that slider too much. They're rearing back and throwing. They can't get the grip on the ball. I mean, there's so many contributing factors to this process. They've all been throwing and pitching the entire year since they were like 9 years old. Playing in these worthless travel ball tournaments to win championships that nobody cares about. Playing in all these showcase events, doing all this extra stuff that's not necessary, especially for guys that are in the pros, because those guys were so much talented than everybody else anyway. You could tell when a guy's going to be a pro when he's a kid. Want to know why? Because he's 6'5" at 12 years old. The guy's a monster. Yeah, obviously he's going to go to the pros. The 5'7" kid that throws 88 ain't going to make it. You don't need to have these kids be pitching all the time. You don't need them to be having this perfect sequence all the time. Say what you want about the pitch clock, which is exactly what Major League Baseball Players Association is blaming it on. But the reality is you have too many young pitchers pitching way too much and trying to be those high velo guys. We just talked about the offseason during Annie and Elston, where a lot of players are not getting paid a lot of money. And I said the top echelon guys are getting paid the money, and they're getting paid so much that the other guys are not, except for pitchers, because you need pitching. And you're spending a lot of money on pitchers that will never live up to the contract because they can't stay healthy. Steven Strasburg retired yesterday. Steven Strasburg suffered injuries that he was unable to ever pitch again. with a gigantic contract that he got because he threw so much. That's another great arm that's out of the game. He retired yesterday. You could add him to that list. But Major League Baseball has a serious pitching problem that they need to fix. And the problem is, even more so, they can't fix it at the Major League level. This is going to take years to fix by fixing the youth. It's kind of like how football is trying to fix concussions. It's taken them a long time to really develop a much safer style of play. And a lot of that has to do with the youth and teaching youth and proper tackling at the youth level, which hasn't always been necessarily the deal. Teaching youth and high school football tackling and the proper ways to tackle. And it's going to take years for those guys to get to the top and understand how to play a safer way and how to be playing actually the way it should have been played in the first place that some people were teaching, but not all were teaching. You have to do the same thing with Major League Baseball. I think it's time to tone it back a little bit on some of this youth baseball and travel ball. And I think it's great for kids in terms of developing and giving them opportunities to play. But sometimes with the arms, I think you have to be really weary about how kids throw, what pitches they throw, what pitches you teach them, at what age can they start learning those pitches, and making sure that they're not pitching every single day because you're trying to win a tournament in Georgia that nobody cares about. I think that's a major factor to Major League Baseball's pitching problems. There's a lot of them. But the problem is still, you can't have this many players on the injured list that are your stars that people want to go watch pitch, not pitch, while you have a bunch of 4A guys out there trying to deal and bullpen days and openers and all the things that people don't want to see with Major League Baseball. 833-288-0973, 833-288-0973. Only got a couple of segments left here on the Braden Surprenant Show. Make sure to hit the like button if you're watching on YouTube. Yes, I know all of you that are watching on YouTube. Hit that like button. Let's smash the like button at the same time. I know Craig Elston likes to say that all the time. We don't have enough likes on the thing. Go ahead. 1, 2, 3. Bang. Hit the like button. Appreciate it. Thanks again for joining us on the Braden Surprenant Show. When we come back, we had some interesting news with arenas in San Diego. I said arenas. That was with an S. You got to build more? Is there a battle to see who can get the arena up first? We'll talk about it when we come back. Braden Surprenant Show, live and local, each and every Sunday. San Diego's #1 sports station, 97.3 The Fan. Want to thank Adam and Carlsbad for calling in during the break, talking about the youth movement. I mean, you're going to have to, if you want to fix a lot of problems at the pro level, it definitely starts in the youth. We talked about tackling in football and how that has drastically changed, but you have to change it at the youth level and the high school level before it will get to the pros instead of just making the pros do it immediately. And the same thing's going to have to be done with Major League Baseball. And it comes to the pitching and redoing how we want pitchers to pitch. But here's the reality. We create what we reward in society for a lot of different things. We create outcomes of what people want to do based on the monetary value in which we value things. And so as much as, we can complain about certain things with society nowadays, you have to look at why people are doing certain things and why we're rewarding it for a lot of different reasons. We could talk about influencers on social media and OnlyFans models and all that stuff and how it's probably not good for the most of society, but that's what is making a lot of money, and that's why people do it, because it makes money. Same thing is said about Major League Baseball. Why is everybody trying to hit a home run every at bat? Because that's what we reward in Major League Baseball. We reward guys that hit the ball over the fence. Those guys get the big paydays. Those guys get drafted. Those guys get offers from colleges. Those guys get significant playing time in high school. So as much as the games let it a strikeout or home run and people complain about it, well, they reward it. If you're giving out $30 million contracts to guys that hit the ball over the fence, what do you think everybody in Major League Baseball is going to try to do? Hit the ball over the fence. That's how you make teams nowadays. That's how you make rosters. That's how you get the call-ups. That's how you get the contract. We reward it. That's the product we get. Same thing with pitching. Who's getting rewarded right now in pitching? Guys that throw the ball with high velocity. Those are the pitchers that are making teams. Those are the pitchers that are in bullpens. Those are the pitchers that are getting gigantic contracts. Guys that throw the ball really hard, not guys that pitch to contact and are Randy Jones style pitchers that gets games over with quickly. Which I find very ironic, because those are the type of players, contact hitters and guys that pitch to contact, that create faster games that Major League Baseball wants. But that's not what we reward in Major League Baseball, do we? No, we reward home runs and strikeouts, and they wonder why the games take so long and why they had to implement all these artificial ways to speed the game up, instead of just going back to rewarding guys for doing the right thing and playing the game the right way, or how it should have been played. For all you baseball traditionalists out there, I'm not saying it's right nor wrong. I'm just saying it is a product of what you reward. And so when talking about youth baseball, what's the reward? We got to play travel ball. If you play travel ball, you make the high school team. If you make that high school team, you're going to go to college. All these fake promises from people. Parents need to understand this from a simple standpoint of, and every parent thinks their kid's going to go pro, right? Love your child. Everything your child does is great. And it's not. I'm not going to sit there and go against it. But the reality is, with youth or with kids trying to make it to college and getting that false promise from certain coaches that will just say whatever it takes just so your parents pay them thousands of dollars for training and all this other stuff. Oh, I can get your kid to D1. If you're a parent, look in the mirror, or even better yet, measure how tall you are, because that is what's getting your kid to college. And that's just the reality of the situation. You want to know if your kid is good enough to play college athletics at a D1 level? How tall are you? How tall is your wife? How big is your kid supposed to be? Because at the end of the day, those are the guys that are going to college to play at a D1 level. Those are the guys that are playing in Major League Baseball. Those are the super athletes. Those are the guys that get looks. Those are the guys that make teams. Those are the guys that get the big contracts. For every one of those guys, obviously, there's a Jose Altuve mixed in there. And there are a couple of smaller players. But the reality of the situation is it's not the coach's fault. It's not even your kid's fault. A lot of it has to do with genetics and how big and tall you are. So do whatever you want. If your kid loves playing travel ball, great, but don't burn his arm out trying to chase a dream that might not happen when you don't understand the grip of reality of the situation. I did want to transition into some arena talk because we've had some reports recently about the arena in the Midway District, and obviously in the Midway District, they're going to try to put in an arena that probably doesn't fit the neighborhood down there just because of a lot of people going into an area that's already got tons of traffic. That was kind of the recent report. San Diego State's got some boosters and people that I don't know how much affiliated they are with the school, are working on potentially. I mean, they want to put in an arena at the Mission Valley site, which I think would be great. The academic side at San Diego State's fighting back against that because they were promised some land over there to be a research institute. So there are some interesting battles on the arena front. Now, what we do know about the Midway District, just to kind of general synopsis of what's going on currently, the group that won the right to negotiate was bought by Stan Kroenke, or at least the majority of the group that was in there is bought by Stan Kroenke. So Stan Kroenke is currently part of and is begun his negotiations, or they have been up at last year they started this. They have 1 year to negotiate with the city a contract of what to build in the Midway District, because every time this is how it works. So you show up, you give your plan, your initial plan wins, right? It's like, well, we have this much low income housing, we have this much Sector 8 housing, we have this much of this luxury, retail, arena is going to be the size. We have all of that. And then whoever wins the bid gets the right to negotiate. That's where you start to see all this stuff get cut in half. Like, oh, well, we're only going to build this much in low-income housing. We're going to build this much of Sector 8. We're going to build this much of whatever. And we're going to make the arena this size. And then it kind of changes from the initial plan. They negotiate back and forth. City always wants more housing. Company that builds the arena wants to have as much luxury stuff as possible. They find a common ground and they get the deal done, and then they start the project. So that's where we're at right now with the arena down in the Midway District. The group that Kroenke has now have 90% of is negotiating with the city to try to find that happy medium of housing, retail, arena. At the same time, San Diego State, who just did a rundown of their arena, they do need to redo Viejas. It's not that it's bad, but it's a point where it's time for an upgrade. And there's a company that is willing to build them a free arena in the Midway District, or not in Mission Valley area. But they would have to redo their plans, which might have to go to a city vote all of a sudden, because the original plans that were negotiated upon and then agreed upon with San Diego State and Mission Valley would have been changed, which means you'd have to potentially go through some lawsuits and everything like that. But the reality is San Diego State boosters, people involved with athletics, not really to the athletic department, would like to put an arena in the Mission Valley area next to Snapdragon Stadium up into a NBA size arena, because the battle for arenas is more lucrative than the battle for stadiums. Stadiums are good, but they're not as great of a moneymaker as arenas are, because you have to sell out a lot more events and have to have bigger events in order for it to be worth your while. Where arenas are, you could sell that place out multiple times with major events, but also, you don't need these gigantic productions to fill that stadium night in and night out, week in and week out throughout the entire year. It's a lot more lucrative to have an arena. That's why San Diego State's people, I will say, want to put one in over in Mission Valley for San Diego State, but then also to have everything run through them. It'll be very interesting to see where this leads. I do think San Diego State does need a new arena. I think they need to. I wouldn't mind if they just revamp Viejas. But I did want to say this about Stan Kroenke being involved. We've talked about it a lot. We've talked about how the Anaheim Ducks, who own the San Diego Gulls, and the LA Kings, and the Southern California NHL entities would never have the NHL put a team in San Diego. Oh, they'll never do it because they'll say no, and this is their territory, and yada, 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 yada. There is some truth to that. Same thing can be said about the NBA. Well, the Clippers, whenever they're building a brand new arena in LA, they would never let anybody into their market. That's why they moved the G League team down here. The Lakers would say it's part of their market. They would never, ever let an NBA team come in here. I do believe that. But at the same time, you have to understand who Stan Kroenke is. Stan Kroenke is a guy that owns multiple franchises in multiple cities. He is a sports guy. He's not building that thing for concerts and conventions. He's building that for major sports. Stan Kroenke is an owner in pretty much every major sports league in the United States, which means a couple of things. One, he's done this before. And two, he knows a lot of people. And he knows a lot of owners. And he's got a lot of pull in a lot of leagues. A lot of things get done because of Stan Kroenke in leagues. He has a lot of influence. He could sway votes. So to say that they can't sway the vote and outpay and make things happen where the Lakers and Clippers have no say it's ludicrous to think that that wouldn't be possible. Same thing with the NHL. I mean, the Ducks can bitch and moan all they want about San Diego being their territory, but if a guy like Stan Kroenke comes involved and has convinced other owners to put a team in San Diego, they'll put a team in San Diego. You could say everything you want about markets and rules, but we know when it comes to billionaires, rules change if they can make more money. And that's exactly what the situation is here. There's a lot of moving parts now. First order of business, they got to get this deal done in the Midway District. But to think that a guy like Stan Kroenke is building this arena and not going to have sports in it is ridiculous. Here's a couple other things about Stan Kroenke on some of the things that I think, I wouldn't say they're myths, but I'll poke some holes in it. Well, Stan Kroenke already owns the team. He can't own another team. He's not going to own the team. He's part of the Walton family. And the Walton family has some relatives that live here in San Diego. They live in La Jolla. They do not own sports teams. They would like to own sports teams. Why do you think he's building it here in San Diego? Well, he already owns this team, that team. It doesn't matter. You can vet it for his other relatives that want some teams. He's not moving the Avalanche. He's not moving his teams from Colorado. But that doesn't mean he can't find a new ownership group that benefits his family in some way or another. Build it and they will come. I've been saying that for years. Try not to. I know it's hard for San Diego. Try not to be incompetent one time. One time. Try to look at the forest one time, San Diego. Politicians, look at the forest one time and study for yourself. One time in San Diego. It'd be nice to have some nice things. It would be nice to not pretend that we're the small, sleepy Navy town anymore, because we're not. Let's think big picture here. We already have a lousy airport that has one runway, which is an utter joke. Oh, well, when you land, it's pretty. Small time. Arena, small time. Couldn't build a stadium professionally, NFL-sized stadium, small time. Had to rely on San Diego State to build a football stadium, small time. Thank God they got the Padres thing done. on Prop C. But hopefully this negotiation goes well, and we'll see what happens. I do think, and here's the thing with San Diego State, they could talk about how they want to be an academic institution all they want. But at the end of the day, I got tough news for the academics out there. People care more about sports than they care about books when it comes to funding and when it comes to money and when it comes to prowess and when it comes to alumni and your school pride. How many times you sat there and be like, you know what? TCU is really good in this academic. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. TCU made the college football playoff. Oh, it's awesome. San Diego State's really good in engineering. San Diego State might be one of the best schools in engineering. Does anybody brag about that? No. Nobody cares. I don't even know what the stats are for academics because alumni don't care. San Diego State make the Final Four? Oh, I care about that. Understand that sports are your gateway to more students in the future, and they are the gateway to getting benefits from your alumni and the gateway to funding your school. Understand the difference. So as much as the academics over at San Diego State don't want to build an arena on the new SDSU West site, I do think they should probably think about it. Because that old arena, Viejas, if you build a new one in Mission Valley, you could turn into everything that you want it to be. And then you keep all the academic buildings by the academics part. So much sense. It makes so much sense. I'm curious to see how that develops. It doesn't sound like anything's really going with San Diego State, so the Midway District will be the focal point. Speaking of schools and sports and why it's important, college football has an entity that is trying to make a super league. I have two opinions on this. One coming from my alma mater of TCU and one coming from San Diego State, in which I agree with what J.D. Wicker had to say about how this might be a non-starter for a lot of schools that aren't part of the exclusive club. I'll tell you more about the Super League and what it means for San Diego State when we come back on San Diego's #1 sports station, 97.3 The Fan. Last segment. Already. This show goes by so fast. I don't know how Scraby only does an hour. There's so much more stuff I'd love to get in. On the Braden Surprenant Show, live and local each and every Sunday. San Diego's #1 sports station, 97.3 The Fan. Local programming on the weekend. I don't know how... I'm going to be careful here because I don't want to bash some of our products on the weekend, but the guy that I cut into the middle of his show, talk about topics that don't matter to San Diego whatsoever. Just zero, that does not matter at all. And nobody's driving around going man, I really need to know what's going on with the New York Jets. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. We're talking Padres. Talked a lot of Padres today. We talked arena news in the last segment. I'm telling you, man, the good news with the arena and everything, and you can hear all the negatives, and I usually get it from people that I would call it biased, I guess, just because they're affiliated with certain outlets that would be impacted by this. But the reality is, any of these handshake agreements with owners immediately get thrown out the window when it comes to money. That's how these people operate. That's how these elite people operate. And the good news for San Diego is you have one of the powerful elites trying to build an arena in San Diego. That's the good news. That's why I think it's possible. San Diego State's arena, interesting. That's an interesting topic. They're feuding with themselves, though, with the academic side and the athletic department side. Here's the other thing, too, because somebody said it during the week. They're like, I don't want to see him build a new arena and spend more money on the athletics because, it's going to raise tuition. It's a separate entity. College athletics are separate from their school. They are two separate entities under one roof, if that makes sense. So, the athletic department has their own budget at San Diego State. They run their own stuff. Everything's the same. They keep their own money. They spend their own money. The academic side, same thing. They run their own stuff. They control the tuition. They have their own budgets. They collect their money. They spend their own money. Very rarely do they ask each other for money. It's very rare. If the athletic department's at a deficit for some reason, they need a little bit extra money, sometimes the academic side will give them money and vice versa. We've seen it at multiple schools, but they're separate entities. So no, San Diego State potentially building a new arena in Mission Valley would not impact tuition. So let's just nip that in the butt right now. I do want to talk about something else that's more important in college athletics. This has a very big impact, I think, on San Diego State. It has an impact on the future of college athletics in general because this is where all the money is going to come from. I could see this going one of two ways, too. This could either be really good for college sports, in which everybody, aside from football, goes back to original, what they were doing. Maybe basketball might be a little different. Get back to the regular conferences, not have to worry about spending all this money and what have you. Or it could lead to the ultimate disaster of college athletics, which is kind of a very wide spectrum, if you know what I mean. Inside, this is an article by Andrew Marchand and Stuart Mendel of The Athletic. They cover college athletics, and they had a really big article this week. If you haven't checked it out yet, I'm going to go through some of it, but the whole article is great on The Athletic, on their website, about the college football SuperLeague, one powerful group's idea to fix a, quote, dead system. One league overseeing college football's highest level, no more conferences as we've known them, playoff berths being decided solely on the field, promotion and relegation for smaller schools, players being paid directly, NIL and transfer portal managed. That's the idea. That's the thought. That's how you fix college football, according to this group. Several college presidents, Roger Goodell's primary lieutenant at the National Football League, and some of sports' top executives have devised a plan dubbed by outsiders as a, quote, SuperLeague, to completely transform college football. Those involved in the group, quote, College Sports Tomorrow, otherwise known as CST, told The Athletic. Although the plan has drawn skepticism from within the sport's current institutions, the people behind the ideas believe they must be implemented. Must be implemented. This is what it would look like. The current College Sports Tomorrow, CST, outline would create a system that would have the top 70 programs, all members of the 5 former major conferences, plus Notre Dame, and new ACC member SMU as permanent members and encompass all 130 plus FBS universities. So basically everybody at D1. According to the current CST outline, it would create 50 plus second division teams that would have the opportunity to compete their way into the upper division, creating a promotion system similar to the structure in European football leagues. The 70 permanent teams would never be in danger of moving down, while the second division would have the incentive of promotion and relegation. The playoffs would not require a selection committee, as the 8 division winners and 8 wild cards from the top tier would go to the postseason. The wild card spots would be determined by record and tiebreakers, much like the NFL. That sounds pretty good. San Diego State Athletic Director John David Wicker tweeted this in response to the article. Quote, interesting concept, though relegation only for the, quote, non-power schools is a non-starter. Just because you have more money doesn't mean you're better. Let the results on the field decide it. I kind of agree with what J.D. Wicker had to say on that from a San Diego State perspective. Now, what does that mean in terms of like divisions and stuff? Basically, you would see a lot of the old divisions that you used to see in college football. You would see the Pac-10. The Pac-10 would be back. Arizona, Arizona State, Cal, Stanford, Oregon, Oregon State, USC, UCLA, Washington, Washington State. The Pac would be back. The big conference, the Big 12, would be mostly the Big 8 with a couple other teams mixed in. BYU, Cincinnati, Colorado, Iowa State, Kansas, Kansas State, Missouri, Nebraska, Utah, and West Virginia. Kind of a hodgepodge conference. You could see the Southwest Conference back. All the Texas schools. Arkansas, Baylor, Houston, Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, SMU, TCU, Texas, Texas A&M, Texas Tech, obviously no Rice. Big 10 would be the old school Big 10, ACC. You'd have the Big East back in college football. You'd have the traditional SEC. And then you'd have the best 10 teams from the group of 5 where the other 40 would be playing in the Division II. All other teams would be in Division II football and could be promoted or relegated with teams from group of 5. So there would be 10 teams that would be ever changing in the top group. Now, if you're San Diego State and you could be in that top 10 teams every year, it doesn't really matter to you. But if you're consistently moving back and forth, it is definitely a non-starter if you're San Diego State. There's a lot of other things that play into this with TV contracts that most of the conferences run through 2030 and 2033. I do think this does set up for a possibility of what Trent Dilfer was alluding to with college athletics, in which very much some Silicon Valley types that can't afford to buy NFL teams but could potentially buy the logos in school colors leased out by schools and franchise teams and make it a pro league is definitely on the table. But overall, from a TCU perspective, now obviously that's for me, I like it because it returns the Southwest Conference. Everything's set in stone. There's no more committees, and TCU would never have to be relegated. But for San Diego State, there is something to be said about the BS that is the Power 5 schools never being relegated while I have to battle my way up and down because my fan base isn't as large as your fan base. from that perspective, it is kind of BS. And I don't like that aspect of it. I think it's really cutting off the ties between the Power Five and the Group of Five. At least it opens up the door for the Group of Five to be able to compete and stay relevant in the top instead of the Big Ten and the SEC just completely going away. But overall, I really like this idea. I think it's a great idea. You're signing up for it to be a pro league, though. This is a pro league. And when you have things like this, and there's more details in the article of The Athletic, but now with a commissioner of a super league for college football, which is what a lot of people have been asking for, you can, as a group, negotiate with a league and a union for college football, and you could have contracts and everything like that. It could be a pro league. Kids don't have to go to school anymore. I'm sure it would be an option if they would chose to do so. But there's a lot of interesting components to this. Whether or not they get rid of eligibility requirements remains to be seen, because that's another thing. That's an antitrust law prohibiting somebody from making money based on how old they are. Sounds like that would be a problem in the grand scheme of things. I don't want to get into all the worms, obviously, with this because our show is basically wrapping up, but it's an interesting concept. I don't like it if I'm a San Diego State fan. I do like it if I'm a Power 5 fan. So it's interesting to see where it goes. I do like getting rid of committees. I do like everything being decided on the field. If you want to be a pro league, which is exactly what this group of individuals wants, the players want it. The team, everybody wants to be a pro league. Let's just make it a pro league with NIL. Give out the contracts. Forget the NIL. Trades, free agency, draft. I mean, you could do a draft. You could do a draft if you did this, because it would be a pro league. Then you would have the college football draft. People would love that. The entertainment value at an all-time high. They are no longer amateurs anymore. They wanted to be pros. They are pros now if you come with this league. I think this league has the recipe for success. I do like that it includes not just the elite 15 to 20, and it keeps an open door for college football of the Group of Five, while also kind of distancing football from everything else. And hopefully in the future, you can return back to conferences that make a lot more sense for all of the other sports in college athletics. I think the separation of football from everybody else would be ideal. And I'm sure they would come up with a basketball version of the Super League too later on. Don't mind it. Don't necessarily know if I'm 100% on board if I'm San Diego State, but that is what negotiation is for. So I kind of agree with JD Wicker on that. That will do it for me. That was a fun, quick 2 hours. I'd love to talk with you guys more, but I'm out of time. I'll be heading over to USD. They got a baseball game against LMU coming up at 1 o'clock. Padres baseball, first pitch at 1:05. Eco Water SoCal pregame show. Padres pregame show with Sam Levitt will be on your way at 12:05. I'm Braden Surprenant. Thanks again for tuning in to San Diego's #1 sports station, 97.3 The Fan. We'll see you next week. Follow me on social media at @B_SURP. We'll see you next week.